Welcome back to DWeb Decoded, a podcast by Filecoin Foundation exploring the intersection of blockchain and the data economy. I'm your host, Aaron Stanley, and today I'm joined by Dr. Stephen Waterhouse, who's founder and GP of Nazaré Ventures, an early-stage AI venture fund. He's a technologist, investor, and entrepreneur who's been working across AI, blockchain, and decentralized infrastructure for almost 3 decades. Stephen, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. It's great to be here. How are you?
So, for today's episode, I really want to discuss an op-ed that you wrote recently for CoinDesk that kind of outlines your vision for how crypto and AI will ultimately function together. And I found this super compelling because you have a pretty deep background in both of these respective areas, and you're quite well positioned to talk about this subject. So I want to dive into that, but maybe before we do, I would love for you to take a moment just to introduce yourself and maybe tell us a bit about your career trajectory and what you're focusing on right now.
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. So a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I did a PhD in this thing that we called machine learning at the time, but now we call AI. My PhD was on neural networks for speech recognition, specifically mixtures of experts, which is a technique that's still used in Mixtral and GPT-4 for scaling. After I graduated in 97, I moved to San Francisco, started working with NASA on big data problems, and then the internet started taking off, so I got sucked into the startup world. Sold my second company to Sun Microsystems, which was later acquired by Oracle. They were a big deal back in the 90s. And
I still remember seeing the Sun Microsystems sign at the Facebook headquarters, right? When you go to the back of the.
That's right. It was the old.
They kind of keep that as a memoriam to why you need to keep moving and not rest on your laurels, right?
Well, Sun was very innovative at various different times. Developed Java, many other things. And so there's a loop back to the Sun story in a minute, but started another company working in the intellectual property space and took that public in 2011. That led to getting into venture sort of for the second or third time, and had a fund acquired by Fortress Investment Group, and then subsequently incubated the digital currency fund inside Pantera, which became Pantera, in partnership with Dan. And was a partner there for almost 4 years, and then started Orchid Labs in 2017, which was a company focusing on decentralized privacy, VPNs, and then more recently AI. In 2020, I moved from San Francisco after 25 years to Europe. I spent my time in Lisbon and Berlin, and I have done a number of things, including continuing to work with Orchid, and most recently started Nazaré, which is a fund focusing on AI. We're not a crypto AI fund. We're also not a crypto fund. We are doing old school venture capital, a thing that people used to call venture capital. We invest in very early stage things and help them build up, and try not to write too many checks because it's too much work and we can't focus on the founders, which is why I started the fund. And we do some deals that have crypto exposure and some deals that don't. It's roughly 50-50 split. Our focus areas are decentralized AI, open source AI, new algorithms. We don't do apps and we don't do hardware. So we're kind of like trying to build the next software infrastructure for the sort of next wave of AI as we see it.
That's amazing. So in this CoinDesk op-ed that you wrote, I think it was maybe like a month or so ago, you laid out quite elegantly a concept that I think I've been thinking about for a long time, and I think some of the folks have been thinking about quite a lot as well recently, which is that a primary function of crypto moving ahead is really going to be like playing a supporting role in like AI systems and other like decentralized like systems. And hoping you can maybe just kind of lay out your thesis for that, and like why are you pushing out this messaging right now? Because it seems like it's kind of going against the grain somewhat of the current crypto zeitgeist. So I just found it quite compelling. So I'd love for you to maybe expand on that thesis.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the article is a bit tongue in cheek, but not really. And it draws on, I guess, like 12 years of experience in the crypto space now, since the earliest, not the earliest days of Bitcoin, but the sort of the earliest institutional adoption of Bitcoin. Both as an investor and a founder, and an investor again. I think part of it is like a few years ago, I was a little bit worried whether we were going to make it. You know, like we weren't going to GMI. And that was, I think, obviously FTX 3AC timeframe. I remember sitting in the sofa, like I wasn't like watching the news. I was like reading the news on Twitter, like watching this thing scroll through, and I was just like, oh wow. And I turned to my girlfriend, I'm like, I don't know, maybe we're not going to make it. I'm not sure. And now I think we're going to make it. And it's not just the regulatory tailwinds. It's really the adoption of this technology in finance. Like it started with ETFs. It's moved its way through to real world assets. It looks like a lot of tokens are going to just end up looking a lot like equity. You know, maybe there'll be special provisions for those. The Andreessen Horowitz token framework looks like it's going to get adopted, you know, partly due to a lot of connections they have inside the administration now, like David Sachs. So for the first time, the US, which is really the strong hegemonic force in finance, in the world's dominant currency, of course, and in so many aspects of trading, has our back. Like they're like, yeah, like let's do it. But just like a lot of things, when they grow up, right, they get less interesting. Or like they're not cool anymore, right? That nightclub you went to, yeah, that's not that cool anymore. The normies are there, and it's not the people who are involved necessarily right now. It's just like we can see the future, we can see the pathway, right? And so those of us who entered the space because we like to be on the cutting edge of things, like I've had a career of being on like in the weird and wonderful parts of technology. It's just not the same, it's just different kind of people. Our friends are leaving, people are having kids, like everyone's growing up a bit, right? And new people are entering the space, which is amazing. And those new people, they wear suits and they are from finance, and our industry is becoming finance. So TradFi, DeFi, all these things, it's not TradFi or DeFi, it's and DeFi and TradFi and real world assets or tokenized, and Stripe just came out with a stablecoin framework, and just like, yeah, this is going to be okay, but this is not what we were doing for a long time. And so that's finance. And then the other thing that's happening is AI. And these are these two sort of pillars, these two tailwinds, and these two effectively like either specific market fit, which you have with the finance thing, or like the beginnings of a market fit for AI. What I'm seeing in the AI space is not just sort of this like, I guess crypto AI, like AI companies with a crypto angle, etc., decentralized AI frameworks, but also just companies that you think would be like crypto AI, but they're just AI companies. They're just trying to serve AI markets. That they talk about product market fit. They talk about customers. They talk about ARR. They don't talk about the token being a product. They talk about a real startup. And they're talking in timeframes of how long to the next customer, and their token it's part of the story, but it's like it is not the story. And you contrast that to the meta that we've had for the last maybe not the last decade, but the last 5 years at least, of build a bunch of crazy infrastructure, super incredible technology, and what's the output? The output is you've got a bunch of people on Discord and a token, and then later they start trying to figure out if anyone's ever going to use this thing. And then we gnash our teeth and wail and talk about how we don't have adoption and so on. It's like, the reason we don't have adoption is because no one's focusing on adoption at the beginning. They're just focusing on the financial part of it. So it's like the whole thing is skewed. So that's why I've been, personally, it's not a reason why I've been moving out of like pure play crypto things, but it's certainly been an observation I've had, and it's certainly a conversation I have with any of the companies that we invest in that are, have a crypto orientation, have a crypto component to their business model. And some of them look at me like I'm an alien when I say, hey, what's your product market fit and who are your customers and do you have any design partners? And they're like, no, we had this really cool network we're building. I'm like, I just don't care. Like you and everybody else. So like, show me something interesting. And then some people do, and then we start seeing really interesting things.
And then, so you make another point, like in the article, and kind of piggybacking off what you're just talking about right here, is that these decentralized systems like blockchain are like in fact revolutionary, but we just haven't really figured out a way for the tokens to reflect the value of some of these networks, right? And the tokens end up kind of, the value accrues to tokens based on just like memes and narratives and other things that don't really have a whole lot of correlation to like the underlying, like what the tech is actually supposed to be doing. And it seems to me this is maybe something we've understood for a while, but we're maybe finally coming to grasp with that, which is probably a good thing. But like, I guess as somebody who's been in this space and, and both like as an investor and as a founder, like, I guess like, what's the disconnect between, like, why haven't these tokens been able to accrue value in like the way that, maybe people originally dreamed they would back in the 2017 era when everyone was launching these things? Like, have we just got the science wrong? Is it an economics issue, or are people just building things that just don't really have value to begin with?
I think that I'll give you an example, or two examples from the DeFi space I was just talking about today. Uniswap and Curve, right? These are businesses like first of all, like I'd like everyone to stop calling their companies projects. Right? Project sounds like something I'm going to do like in high school over like the summer. These are companies. If you're not building a company, I don't know what you're building. Like, and yeah, maybe there's some reason regulatory wise where you shouldn't call it a company, but let's just face up to it. We're trying to build companies. You guys can come for me later. So companies are supposed to make money. They're supposed to have users. Uniswap and Curve do both. Their tokens they're there, but I don't sit around thinking about them a lot. I don't sit around like, I'm worried about my Curve holdings. I mean, I'm sure somebody is, but I'm just sitting there going like, I can use Curve. I can swap things with it. It's amazing. I can build yield on it. This thing is like an incredible project, like a product. Sorry, not a project. It's got users. It makes money, and these are the things to focus on. And so, in your question, it does like pull up that thing is like we're also worried about the tokens. That instead we should be worried about the users and how we build things that people care about. In between these two extreme perspectives, I think there's still a lot of opportunity. And like I'm still I have like NFTs. I have like big generative art pieces. I'm like I was a punk holder, ape holder. I've done all the stuff. I'm obsessed with identity, ZK. I'm a true believer. I'm trying to talk about the reality today. And if you're a founder or an investor, you got two choices. You got three choices, like pick finance and AI, like there's a one or two, or like kind of mess around on the things that no one cares about at the moment. Because there's huge opportunity there in the sense there's asymmetric returns. Like you don't know what's going to happen. Maybe like, they build I got a bunch of Pokemon cards. Maybe that's the next thing. I don't know. Like get wild and wonderful. There's probably huge opportunities there because in the like downstream of stable coins being adopted and decentralized AI systems using crypto in some way, and we can talk about that later. There's the fact that suddenly these crypto rails become standard engineering practice. And when Stripe says they've got an agent API and a stablecoin API, everyone should sit up and listen because those guys dominate. They dominate payments. Like forget everything else. Everyone's got it plugged in. So if they've suddenly now got stablecoins, that's a gateway. Like this whole intersection everyone's been looking for, it's right there. It's Stripe stablecoin. And I think what everyone in crypto could do to do a little bit more is like get out a bit of crypto, spend a bit more time in other worlds and not see it as like an either or, because it really isn't. It's like we have to engage with the rest of the world in order to be relevant. And this idea we're going to build some like beautiful decentralized universe where everyone's like everyone's tokenized and everyone's a meme coin. It's like, yeah, it sounds cute, but that's not going to happen. And what's going to happen is we're going to kind of like get married to some of these other technologies and figure out, and industries, and figure out how to actually be relevant. And then the kind of or we become irrelevant. But I think the or just isn't going to happen. They've already embraced it, and they're already going to bring it in. There'll be like a spectrum of exactly how decentralized or how like degen things are, and that'll play out. And there'll be still meme coins, there'll be still NFTs, and still other things going on. Crypto will become just as weird as the rest of the internet. It already is. And so the internet's already really weird. So it's just becoming part of the internet now. And I think that's also why it feels less exciting and less sort of, hypey, and there's less guys wearing Balenciagas and, like hyped up in their, 2,000 euro seekers, because it's not that interesting as it was. It's hitting the mainstream. It's growing up. So that's really what the article was about.
It's not the frontier cool new thing anymore, right? No. I think this industry was like founded by people at the bleeding edge.
And that's like the 20-something kids I'm hanging out with in San Francisco. I think they think they're building a super intelligence. And maybe they are. So it's like, maybe they really are. That's the weird and wonderful.
Yeah. Stable coins are not weird and wonderful to these people, I presume, right?
They're literally stable. It's in the name.
So, well, and I guess maybe kind of jumping onto this AI pivot here, this line of thought, and a point I've heard you make a few times is that you think crypto and blockchains will remain like very relevant pieces of inside the AI stack, essentially. Yeah. Right. So there's ways that these maybe aren't the most like sexy use cases, but things like decentralized compute, like decentralized GPU networks, decentralized storage, these types of things will be imperative to essentially bringing trust and bringing verifiability to like AI networks. So would love for you to maybe riff on that concept.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of things. So like if we start on agents, for example, which is a very, very fun conversation to have there. So the agent space, most people in crypto think about virtuals and ELIZA and the frameworks happening there. So about 2 years before that, I started playing around with agent technologies in San Francisco in this thing called MAX, this multi-agent cooperative systems. And the idea was if you replace the SaaS framework of enterprises with a bunch of agents, it's more flexible, it's more dynamic, it's kind of like what you expect the system to be. And that has like taken off like wildfire. And there's now companies like Crew AI, there's frameworks like LangChain that allow you to build agent technology. Like, I'm not talking about trading DeFi or tweeting and building bots that tweet that make more bots that tweet. I'm talking like systems that actually, provide value, increase revenue, decrease costs, all these kind of things. These frameworks are there. So a little while back, Stripe produced an API for agents, and then just recently they introduced a stablecoin API. So this conversation that was being had a little while back last year, where it was like crypto and agent tech are going to merge. They were right. People were right. The rails for agents are going to be crypto rails, but not because of crypto, but because of Stripe. Because Stripe said, hey, we're doing stablecoins. And because everyone's using stablecoins, not just Stripe, but because everyone's adopting stablecoins, suddenly the rails for these things will be stablecoins and potentially, volatile tokens to the extent that that's useful. I think everyone agrees that, all payments should probably be stable because, you tend to pay for things in stablecoins, fiat-denominated things. And then you might accumulate and take risk on other things. So decentralized GPU platforms are fascinating too, because you can pay for those on a Stripe network if you're all on the same network, or you can pay for them in stable coins or other tokens. Why are they interesting? Well, there are decentralized GPU platforms like one of our investments, Bass.ai, that doesn't use crypto rails. It just uses regular payment rails. They're one of the largest decentralized GPU clouds now. Essentially, same idea: bring your own GPU, rent it out, other people can use it. Then you build up services on top of it and more interesting things that you can sell to users. So you can build decentralized GPU things without crypto rails, or you can build them with them. We have a company, Layerlens, that's using EigenLayer as a framework there. Prime Intellect is using, I think they're using Base now. New Research is using Solana. There's like a lot of people using different rails now. The way we look at the compute stack at Nazaré is essentially like a continuum. It's not like either or. It's not like mega clusters or edge devices. It's like how do you build the software that allows you to work across any of these systems, build models, test time compute, do inference, reinforcement learning, like whatever it is you're building and running, can you do that across different kinds of compute, and what's the software stack for doing that? And crypto has a big part to play in that, not just in the payments, but also in the coordination. So if you have decentralized systems, how do you know you can trust the outputs? How do you slash the output? How do you slash the node if like they're starting to produce like deliberately bad results or like, accidentally bad results? How do you verify that information? And this is where some of the techniques around FHE and ZK, which you've also invested heavily into, both in this fund and in the past. Like I'm a very early investor in Risk Zero, which is a now popular ZK VM. I did the first institutional round in Zcash back at Pantera, so I've been like obsessed with this ZK thing for a while. There's that aspect to it. But a lot of these systems that are using crypto as the back end and the rails are then selling their services to customers that need AI resources. So with LayerLens, they're selling benchmarking services. Time Intellect, they're going to be selling training and inference and so on, right? There are other systems that are more kind of self-contained in a decentralized world. And we have the BitSensor network, which started off kind of almost like as a curiosity initially, and then with a bunch of mimetic activity, and now is like starting to get some very interesting startups being launched on it. So that's a new area where it's very much an entirely crypto native environment, but with again the outputs of some of these models being relevant and being able to be licensed in different ways, and you can build these things to serve real needs. That's a good slice through the space, I think.
Yeah, no, that's pretty thorough. And obviously Filecoin is a decentralized data storage project. And I think there's some interesting use cases in the stack for, using decentralized storage for like, storage of like training data, even like accessing kind of token gating, potentially like data sets for being able to, like license to other models to be able to train, use that data for training purposes, et cetera.
Well, I think Filecoin is really, the most dominant example of these, what people are now calling DeepIn and decentralized resources actually working. So I always present Filecoin as one of the highlighted example of why you want to do this, how these decentralized incentive architectures can work. Things that are actually being used at scale. And so, there's of course enormous opportunities there. And we've invested in one, and I'm looking at another opportunity coming out of Protocol Labs. So AI research that's come out of that group and is backed by the Filecoin, Protocol Labs research teams and venture teams. So we're big fans of that framework.
Amazing. Yeah, and then kind of moving on here, I think you kind of tying this all back into what you were talking about before, where you're kind of proposing like a wholesale rethink of this whole like token as a product type of model, like we've been kind of seeing in the past few years in crypto. And in the piece that you wrote, you're talking about basically how like we can either just look at these things as just like kind of speculative tokens, retail products, or we can really like embrace crypto as this kind of supporting role in AI. Like AI is kind of the true thing we need to be really focusing on, is trying to figure out how does crypto blockchain networks help to kind of reinforce what's happening in this landscape. I guess the question would be like, what would be your perhaps like your call to action for like teams and founders that are like looking to build at this kind of crypto AI intersection? And then what do you see are like the biggest challenges here? Like, are these, like, I think in crypto, like you see a lot of people in crypto trying to pivot over into AI, but like, I don't necessarily see a lot of AI people trying to pivot into crypto and be like, oh, hey, let's take some of what these guys are doing and incorporate that. So maybe like, is there still kind of like a dissonance there that needs to be ironed out?
Yeah, well, so if you cast your mind back to 2022, that moment I was explaining on the couch, it was a very dark time for crypto. Like many of us thought it was over, and a lot of people left. Also who left, and I met a founder in San Francisco the other day, and he worked at Solana Labs, and shortly after FTX collapsed, he left, and then started this, spent some time thinking what to do, found a co-founder and started what's now a very promising AI startup. Doesn't have a crypto connection. Not intended to. It's building decentralized agents, but there's no crypto angle right now. Not to say it might not in the future, but it's just not the play. And his point was, and he's in his late 20s, his point was that a lot of young people, talented young people at that period of time were very drawn into crypto. It was this fascinating space. It was like, the cultural zeitgeist. It was NFTs everywhere. It was just like, it was crazy. It was fun. It was good parties. It was just fascinating to work on, travel around the world. Part of the crypto traveling circus, it was living the dream. Felt like you're a rock star. And then all the air got taken out of the room and it was like dead. And not just dead, but people were going to jail, And that's when a lot of them pivoted. And not even really pivoted, but just said, I'm going to find something else to do because there's nothing to do here. So they found AI. And the second thing that happened was that AI at that time was coming up. So if you were already in AI and you're starting to like come up this curve of like, oh my God, we're becoming more relevant, more and more relevant. And crypto's doing the opposite. It's going like this, right? And so as a result, there's almost like an immune reaction when people in AI hear that there's people in the other side doing this crypto AI thing, and they're just like, whatever, that's just like a joke, right? There's some kind of mimetic thing. It's never going to go anywhere. Those guys are silly. They're just like raise capital and do silly things with it. And there's even like a kind of anti-remote culture thing in San Francisco. Like people are like, we don't like Zoomers. We don't want to talk to people just on a call. Like I can't really get meetings unless I go there. Like feel like, yeah, sure, sure, we'll talk to you, but can you just come and we'll talk to you? And the younger ones, the older ones are better, but the younger ones are very impressionable. That's just about changing now. And there's a couple of companies that made this change. Prime Intellect, which are an investor in News Research, have been doing some very serious work in research on decentralized training and inference, publishing very well. There's another company, Pluralis. Jensen was one of the very early ones in this space. And when you actually go back, CoreWeave was started out of crypto because they were doing like crypto GPU. Together AI was originally focusing on decentralized systems. There's a number of these companies that actually started, like Fast AI started with lots of crypto workloads. So there's a lot of vintage from this world that is really connecting the two. But you've had this immune response for quite a while, which is starting to thaw. So recently Prime Intellect got a Series A investment from Founders Fund, and Joey at Founders Fund heads up their sort of, crypto and AI group. But then the real slam dunk was Andrej Karpathy. So, like sort of AI modern day AI legend, came into the round. So they got kind of blessed with like, the traditional AI world thinks they're real. And there's people now writing a lot about Prime Intellect and the work they're doing. And when they talk about the product and what they're working on, they mention all these different things in the open source side of it, and then how the works, the nodes and so on. And at the end, they mention that the coordination framework and the payment rails are going to be on Ethereum. But they don't start with it. So that's not it's not like, oh yeah, we're launching this token and here's a tokenomic, blah, 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 blah. It's like, this is the system we're building. This is the product. This is what we're trying to go after. This is why. And these are the things, this is one of the ways that we're doing it. And that's my real call to action is figure out your product, figure out what you're trying to build. Who's it for? Talk to those people, get people starting to use it, start getting a product market fit, maybe even get some revenue, like crazy in crypto, you get revenue. And then layer in the other stuff that makes the thing unique and really understand why decentralization is important to your product, understand why crypto rails are important to your product, why coordination might be important, like whatever those things are, those are the things that they're product features, but they're not the product. Right? Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, very well put. Maybe last question here. I would love for you to wrap up maybe by just kind of giving us maybe a pontification about like, how do you see these like kind of more like decentralized open source AI systems ultimately playing as kind of a counterbalance to maybe the big AI, like the Sam Altman, the ChatGPTs, right? I think there's kind of this, I think there's kind of this back and forth right now where you have, I think some people, they kind of see the news and there's kind of this like doomeristic mentality of like, oh, like ChatGPT, Sam Altman are going to kind of take over the world. and then you have a lot of people building things on the open source decentralized side. But like, can these things realistically compete with, Sam Altman basically being able to raise infinite amounts of money for his project, et cetera? So I'd be curious to kind of see like how, like get your thoughts on like just how you see these different dynamics kind of playing out in the future. And like, I mean, do these open source decentralized systems like ultimately kind of win out over these kind of the big AI industry type companies, or are we going to have kind of a counterbalance back and forth, or like how do you see these all kind of interacting in the future?
I mean, from a philosophical perspective, I think that, and I believe that having open source systems, and that does actually sort of imply decentralized systems as well, is very important. I think these questions of bias and safety are very relevant. And I think people sort of maybe underestimate the value of some of the entities like OpenAI in terms of how they are curating the interfaces that most people in the world are using. And Eric from Venice is a friend, and really admire what they're doing. But you can argue with this. Libertarians will argue with me about this one, but to the extent that is everyone ready for completely unfiltered AI? These things are very intense. So I don't want to like get too much into the weeds of what's good for society, but this is where the conversations end up, right? We end up in talking about AI. We end up talking from everything from spirituality, like are these things, are we building gods? Are they conscious? Through to the concept of what should society be allowed to be exposed to, and we've covered that a lot in our work in Orchid in the last sort of almost decade now. I think there'll be a hybrid of these things. I don't think it's going to be an either or. I don't think that so-called big AI is going to necessarily stamp out OpenAI or vice versa. I think there'll be a place for both of them. I think, for example, decentralized AI systems right now are finding a lot of traction within university research labs or startups, where it's just easier and faster and cheaper to go grab that compute than to try and sign up for CoreWeave, where you just a massive waiting list, or you can't buy the NVIDIA chips. You're just like, screwed. So you just like sign up for these other services. But I think that's the biggest driving force, and this is where I was kind of going before I gave you the philosophical preamble, is that the economics are going to drive these decentralized systems and the open source systems. There's a reckoning coming, just like we had with the .com. You can't raise infinite money forever. Eventually, you run out, and whether you run out because people say no, or whether something happens, like, I don't know, tariffs, or like the Great Financial Crisis Part 2, or something else, which means that the purse strings of the guys spending the money on the hardware and everything else just get squeezed. But meanwhile, the demand for these systems and the capability of the system just keeps going up a curve, right? So everybody wants it, everyone's using it, but suddenly you can't afford it. Well, what's the answer? The answer is you have to have cheaper systems. So we call this MATCHA, which is Make AI Cheap Again. And it's like a sort of a riff, obviously, on other make something cheaper, make something great again, etc. But the idea is, if you follow the curve of hardware innovation, eventually, this, just like Andreessen talks about, the software eats the world. The software figures out a way to route around this super, super expensive hardware. The NVIDIAs, the CUDA systems, these liquid-cooled steampunk things that you see at the big NVIDIA conferences. It's crazy. Like, this stuff's so expensive and so complicated. Simpler systems will be built with distributed hardware, maybe decentralized hardware over time, where the software will be the reason why this stuff works. And that's what we're investing in, is that software.
Oh, amazing. I think that's a great way to wrap up the conversation. Thank you for that. I'll turn it back to you. Any final thoughts, and then how can folks find you if they want to follow you or get in touch?
No, it's just it's an honor and amazing to be on this podcast. I'm a big fan of your work, and of course, Filecoin Foundation. You can find me just Nazaré, NAZARE.io, or just search my name with crypto, and you'll find me pretty fast.
Amazing. Well, Stephen, really appreciate your time today, and wishing you lots of success over the rest of 2025.
Thank you, sir.